Question. It seems that many human gurus use earthly lineages going back to masters in order to solidify the claim of being a perfect guru and representative of God. It seems like this appeals to the human linear intellect, but it's actually a very evil trick to keep people trapped in a lower state of consciousness. It's a complete denial of our inner teachers and the true paths of spiritual freedom, because most people remain attached to the human teachers and they say they are nothing without their human gurus. They have all kinds of beliefs that they use to justify remaining attached to the gurus. Could you also comment on this? Well, yes, I basically agree with what's being said here because I've observed the same thing in some people, but certainly not all. Now, as I've said in another question that's similar to this one, if you look at the whole idea of a spiritual guru tradition, what's the goal of a true guru? It is to make himself obsolete so that the student no longer needs the guru. Now, my first spiritual book that I found was Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. And Yogananda describes in the book how he found his guru at a fairly early age. I think he was around 12. And the guru was called Sri Yukteswar. And he had an ashram, and Yogananda lived in the ashram. And he had some trouble submitting to the guru because he really thought, he lived in a town, and he really thought the real gurus were in the Himalayas. So one day he ran away from his guru to go to the Himalayas, and all kind of obstacles were put in his way. It's actually a very funny description in the book. And then he ended up coming back to the guru and realizing he was actually his guru. But despite the fact that Yogananda felt he had found his true physical guru and he couldn't make progress without the guru, there still came a point where both the Yukteswar and Yogananda acknowledged that the guru had taken the student as far as he could take him. And now it was Yogananda's life plan to become a guru in his own right. And that is, of course, what's implied in the guru tradition, right? That at least some of the students of a previous guru, they become gurus that carry on the tradition, right? So it is really a misunderstanding of the tradition if people become codependent on the guru. It's a misunderstanding of the whole purpose. It's not to say that everybody who's a student needs to become a guru, because that may not be the case, but I'm just saying codependence on the guru is a misunderstanding of what spiritual growth is all about. Because if it's a valid guru, the goal of that guru should actually be to make himself or herself obsolete, so the student no longer needs them. And so you can look at if there is a guru who encourages this codependence on the guru, that guru is probably a false guru. And if there are students who are putting themselves in this state of mind where they believe they are codependent on the guru, they are literally false students. I mean, you really can't call them anything else. They are false students because they are refusing to do what is required on the spiritual path. And it's perfectly valid that you find a spiritual guru or a tradition and you follow that for a time. But there comes a point on the spiritual path, in order to go higher on the path, you have to take responsibility for yourself, for your own growth. You have to be willing to make your own decisions. You have to be willing to use your own intuitive discernment as the basis for those decisions. Otherwise, you just remain at a certain level, and you can stand there for the rest of this lifetime. But that's not what true spiritual growth is about. It's an ongoing process of growth. So it's true that it can actually, what is the expression here, a very evil trick to keep people trapped in the lower state of consciousness. And that is true. If you have this outer teaching that a certain guru is the perfect guru, and that you cannot make spiritual progress without the guru, that you are dependent on the guru to make spiritual progress, that's a lie. I mean, that is just simply a false guru who makes that claim, or false students who make that claim about the guru. And it's a false guru who allows the students to to actually make that claim about the guru. Because a valid guru will say, yeah, it's okay that you are following me for a time, but you need to see that this is going towards your independence. So, as the question says, it's a denial of our inner teachers. Yes, because the real goal of a valid outer guru is to take you to a point where you don't need the inner guru. But what does that, you don't need the outer guru. What does it mean that you don't need the outer guru? It means you have discovered and made contact with, created a connection with the inner guru. And we have inner gurus. The Ascended Masters, they are Ascended Masters assigned to each person that has a spiritual potential. We also have something called our Christ Self, which can give us a certain frame of reference for making decisions. We, of course, have our spiritual self, our I Am Presence, can also be said to be an inner guru. So, as the person says, they have all kinds of beliefs that they use to justify remaining attached to the gurus. And yes, I have also observed this over the years, that and it's simply a psychological mechanism. If you are not willing to make your own decisions, to take responsibility for making those decisions, then you need to project that there's somebody outside of yourself who is infallible and who can tell you what to do. And therefore, if you do what that outer authority figure tells you to do, you can't go wrong. This is not just in the spiritual field. Look at the political field, how there are people who believe this about certain political leaders, that they are infallible, they can't do anything wrong. And they really stop thinking, and they just uncritically accept whatever the political leader or spiritual guru tells them. And they want to remain in that codependent relationship. And you can say, but what I always say in my videos is everything is guided by free will. So if people want to have that experience for the rest of their lifetime, who am I to tell them they shouldn't have it? That's perfectly fine. But what I will say is, it also means that once you make that decision, you are not going to grow beyond that level of consciousness you had at the time. And that is not a very high level of consciousness, because otherwise you wouldn't have made that decision. You would have taken responsibility for yourself and started climbing higher. So you can kid yourself all you want. You can make yourself believe that, oh, I'm obedient to this perfect guru, and therefore I'm guaranteed to whatever you see as the goal, ascend or go to heaven or not having to re-embody or reach cosmic consciousness after this lifetime. But it's just not going to happen. I mean, what is going to happen is that your soul leaves the body, you have a life review, and you see that you didn't fulfill the highest goal that you defined in your life plan before you came into this embodiment. So I talked about in several videos, we all have a life plan, and we define the highest potential of what we could reach, what level of consciousness we could reach. And once you make the decision to make yourself codependent on an outer guru, you stop your growth. And that is not your highest potential, I guarantee you. It is not your highest potential. So I understand, and I've seen it myself, that people have all kinds of arguments, and this is why. If you want to understand this, you need to look at my playlist about non-duality. I have a couple of videos where I talk about the duality consciousness. And what I basically say in there is, the duality consciousness, you have plausible deniability and plausible plausibility. Because in duality, you can validate any viewpoint you want, and you can invalidate the opposite, any alternative. So people can come up with all kinds of arguments for why their guru really is the highest, it really is infallible, and they can deny any evidence to the contrary. I mean, I don't have any particular aversion towards gurus, but I have watched this documentary on Netflix called Wild Wild Country, which is about the Osho movement. And when I watch this video, it's mind-boggling to me that people can see what Osho actually did or what he allowed to happen and still believe that he was the highest guru ever to come to earth and he was a valid guru. Mind-boggling. But it's again this, you can deny any evidence to the contrary, and you can always find arguments that seeming to validate what you want to believe. But as Jesus said 2,000 years ago, on their fruits ye shall know them. And if you look at the fruits of Osho, well, if you're neutral, you know him. You know what kind of a guru he was. But anyway, it was not really my point to bring that up. as a major thing, but just as an example of this. People can really believe anything they want to believe. And I know people who were in transcendental meditation 40 years ago, and who are still there, and they still believe that one day they'll reach cosmic consciousness if they continue to meditate and do what the Maharishi told them. And, you know, I know people who went to Summit Lighthouse 20, 30 years ago, and they still believe that somehow Elizabeth Care Prophet is going to help them or guarantee their ascension. And it's just, again, this, you don't want to recognize that there's a threshold on the spiritual path. And in order to go beyond it, you have to take responsibility for your growth, making your decisions, making your discernment, and learning from everything you do, instead of thinking that it should be, everything you do should be infallible. Because that's why you want an infallible guru to tell you what to do, right? You're so afraid of making a mistake. But there are no mistakes on the spiritual path if you are willing to learn from them. As I've said before, it doesn't matter if you followed what you now recognize to be a false guru. You can learn from that and look at what was it in my psychology that caused me to believe this, and what is the illusion there that I need to overcome so I can rise to a higher level of consciousness. And when you do that, there are no mistakes. Everything you have done can be turned into a stepping stone for progress. And that's the difference between those who make it on the spiritual path and those who reach a certain threshold and never go beyond it.